Hey friends, so welcome back to DBC Live. We are so excited for you to join in today for National Poetry Month special edition of live sessions happening with Mike Johnston in the house, the author of You Are Poetry. If you haven't had the opportunity to read You Are Poetry or order your copy, please do that right now. There's a link above or below wherever you're watching. Yes, Kristen's in the house. We are talking poetry is science tonight. So it makes sense that Kristen would be in the house as a science teacher. We're excited to share each Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Mike will be joining us for the whole month of April, sharing how poetry is everywhere. It's in all of our subjects. It's everywhere. So Mike, in case people are joining for the very first time, please do tell them who you are, short introduction, what you do, and then we'll dive into some content in just a moment.
Well, I'm Mike Johnston. I am a very proud public school, middle school educator. I work with about 120 really fantastic kids on a rotation, and one of the things I do teach them is science, but I do teach them their ELA, their poetry piece as well. So that's kind of my big background. When I'm not doing that, I spend a lot of time pushing for the value of poetry education. Do some slam poetry things here or there. And you're right. This is the book. I finally got my own copy. So other people got copies first, and I had to get pictures from them. But I like to say that this is the book that I got to co-author because it's full of really great examples of people doing the activities, including my own kids and things like that. So really excited to actually have a physical copy in my hands. It's been a really great experience. So now I'm happy to be part of the DBC team, doing a really great poetry month, sort of jumping on the best possible things that we can do to spark poetry in their classroom, and it's just been really exciting. So
we are so pumped to have you. Just honored, actually. Sean, I saw that you were ordering your book recently too. I saw that on Twitter, I think. So super excited to hear what you think about your poetry too. And I've seen quite a few of you that have joined the lives that are also commenting over on Twitter. Keep that going. Don't forget to use the hashtag #YouArePoetry and share with Mike and DBC_Inc. what you're doing this month, because we get great ideas from each other. Like Mike was saying earlier, I feel like I co-author this book because I'm always putting ideas out there, and then other people are sharing how they've incorporated it into their learning setting. So
absolutely, and I love people sharing the stuff they're doing too, because I had an author bucket list, like a little dream list of wouldn't it be great if people made notes in the book? Wouldn't it be great if people used stickies? And wouldn't it be great if people shared that they were doing the activities and it meant something to them? And all of those things are happening. So yes, please share. I love, it's bucket filling to see all that. So please share.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Mike, we are letting you take the mic. There's my favorite joke every time. It's not going to get old after week 4, right? Or it's like a dad joke. You just keep telling it, and eventually people are just like,
always great.
We just laugh because. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you're joining on the playback, please do add your comments as Mike is sharing some content tonight. He's going to be talking to us about poetry is science. I'm hoping that some of you will get some great ideas. We'll be sharing this out through social media and then also in our email list. And if you get a great idea from this session with Mike, please do, like we said earlier, share it out. Tell us about it. Respond to the email, whatever it is. We'll make sure Mike gets a hold of it and can share out with his community of poets and teachers who are incorporating poetry in everything that they do, which is what we hope the whole world will start to do before long. Absolutely. So, Mike, I'm going to let you take it over from this point and do share all about science. Poetry is science.
Thanks, bud. I really appreciate it. I do have to apologize for the little cough I got going on here. We are in the middle of a snowstorm here in Winnipeg, so I was shoveling a little bit ago, and the cold does that. So my apologies if I'm interrupting myself with a little bit of coughing. And also, my apologies if I talk like way too much tonight, because this is possibly my favorite connection, because poetry and science are kind of like dual loves for me. In fact, I even gave a TED talk a little bit ago called "The Synonym for Science is Poetry," in which I talked about how the two things are really doing the same job. And I really do believe, excuse me, I really do believe that science and poetry are synonymous. They're really doing the same job, because we're using poetry, we're using science as a way to sort of find out how we connect, where we belong, and where we're sort of attached to, where we fit, and what we work with, but just in slightly different ways. Science curriculum really comes down to understanding the nuts and bolts of the natural world, from as far away as like planetary study to as close as the cells and systems in our own body, to the ecosystems that we share with other living things, and the interactions with all the pieces of the things going on inside that, which I'll talk about in a second. And the senses that we use to understand that reality, and then even understanding how the senses work. Like, there's so much going on where science and poetry are really doing the same work of trying to figure out where we fit and what our value is in those big systems. Honestly, I see that poetry as science is as easy as believing it is, and making the decision to talk about each of these pieces through emotional experiences and finding human connection points. A lot of scientists, and this is science teachers, this is one of my big favorite challenges when people come up to me and they're like, I love this book, but I'm a science teacher, not really an ELA teacher. I'm not sure how it fits. And I love that. I love the challenge of that, because I believe it's as easy as seeing that you're already making it fit. One of the best people I've ever met is also one of the best educators I've ever met, a science educator, Roland, tremendous human being. And, when the book came out, he was like, I got your book and I'm super excited about it, but I'm a science teacher. And so, I'm probably just going to pass it on to some ELA folks once I read it. And I said, that's the challenge. I love that, because Roland, like many other science teachers, are already doing incredible work that they're just not really calling the right things. They're not really adjusting their perspective on that. Like, Roland develops these incredible in-depth units and dresses up and has personas. It gets into character and physically changes his rooms. The students come in and they have a real in-depth human connection to that material. And that's where the poetry is, that human connection. As educators, we're not inventing information. That's not the job of education, to invent new information. Our job is to connect the information that exists to learners, helping them code that information and catalog and comprehend that information. So, excuse me. My goal with UR Poetry is to change the way that people see and talk about poetry. And there's a lot of poetry already going on in the science classrooms, as I said, because we're looking for the language of emotional literacy. And too often, people who teach science see those two things as really separate, right? The nuts and bolts of the universe and the feelings of the universe as almost mutually exclusive, right? So I think the biggest thing we have to do to make sure that poetry becomes science is to start asking the question, what does it feel like to have this experience? What does it feel like for something in that experience, right? And sort of draw out those two pieces. So I want to tell you a little story about something that we actually did in the classroom. I am a huge fan of growing things in the garden. I'm a huge fan of growing things and talking about how they're growing and why they're growing. And this year was an especially big challenge because I'm teaching in a gym right now. And I'm teaching in the gym because that's where I have to be. There's no windows in this gym right now. There's no natural light coming on, but we challenged ourselves scientifically to research and look up what we would need to do to sort of cheat the physical system, right? What plants could we get that were hardy enough? What things could we do to make situations comfortable for plants to grow? What environment could we physically create to take a seed and germinate it and make it into something really wonderful? So of course, my little scientists, we had all the problem solving we needed. We had all the scientific method where we thought of things and tested things, and some things failed and some things were great. And we needed new physical materials, and we tested off all that we could. We had light reading meters. We had everything we needed to. And then we created living things, right? We created vegetables. We created like snacks in the class. There is a snack garden in my classroom right now where students can eat vegetables in the middle of a gym where there is no windows at all. But there is poetry in several different places here. One of my favorite things that we did this year was we actually took that garden, and once we figured out what we wanted to do in that garden, what we wanted to grow and how we wanted to grow it, we talked about, we wrote about the poetry of how these things grow best. So we took the science of how these plants grew best, and I had them write poetry about how do I grow best. Instead of writing about plants from a they perspective, I had them write about how do I grow best from the perspective of a plant. And then after they had done that, I had them write about themselves. How do you grow best as a person? What is something that helps you grow? How do you grow as a person, as an education, as somebody who's learning? And they took those words, and the students pulled a few of those words and wrote them down on tissue papers, and we put them in the garden. We planted them in the garden, and now we call it our living poetry garden, because all the words that they put in there, words like lazy and failure and boring and unkind, and words that they didn't really like that they knew that they associated with themselves, they decided they wanted to grow through those words. So we talked about how do plants grow best? How do you grow best? Why are the experiences similar? And we really linked the process of germination and growth and the needs of the environment to what those students were doing. And then they got really pumped because the plants grew through those words. The plants, they grew through those words. So now when they're eating these, like one of my favorite moments of the year, I had a student who came in and she was like, I knew it. I knew that these plants were going to bloom today because I woke up and I just felt like I was blooming through my word today. And I was like, this is my favorite thing. And it was all like science and poetry live together in these living things and their process and in the way that we talked about them. So my biggest thing with poetry and with science educators is that you just have to change the language. You're already doing the work of making sure that there is emotional literacy, even if you don't know that you're doing that, right? you have to connect through those things. So blooming through their words was massive for them. So if you have the opportunity to plant and grow things in your room and sort of connect students to the emotional language of what that growth means, that was huge poetry for us. If you don't, that's totally okay. I also did another really great activity, and I love this one because a lot of science revolves around natural systems, ecosystems, animals, adaptations, excuse me, food chains, food pyramids, all that stuff. There are scientific pieces about the natural world that we inhabit through a ton of different curriculum. So what we did was we studied ecosystems, but we studied it at the same time as we studied their personal needs. So we did a project called We Are an Ecosystem. And we studied how the classroom is an ecosystem in terms of not just the physical needs, but the emotional needs as well, right? So we identified at the beginning of the year that there are some kids who had huge needs, like, I always want people looking at me. I want to be the person who is like, please put me on the forefront all the time. I want to do presentations all the time. That's one of my emotional needs. And I had other kids who were like, one of my needs is to just chill out and just not be called on for anything. And I'd like to just write down my understanding and hand it into you. I want lots of friends around me, right? I want to be at the back of the room. Some kids are like, I want to be at the front of the room so I can see better. And we took their emotional understanding, how we are emotionally an ecosystem of people with just a tremendous, beautiful variety of needs. And we connected that to the way ecosystems work. We talked about how some of the biotic and abiotic factors of who they are as people really influence things in the room, like the physicality of where you're sitting and the chairs you're sitting on and your physical needs, interacting with things like the hard plastics of chairs, right? Interacting with things like, I'd like to be close to the door because there's a different vibration here, you know, like it's really interesting to sort of listen to those things and then connect them to the way that the natural world is working. So the ecosystem of us, like we are an ecosystem, was a really interesting project, and then allowed us to talk a ton about the natural world around us and really sort of constantly link that back to the emotional literacy language of who we are and what our needs are. So it was tremendous. That was one of my favorite science projects that we did. When I'm workshopping and I don't have time to do the development of a large project like that, I like to work with specific animals, because a lot of times, and this is in the book as well, a lot of times kids connect really well with the idea of animals. They get a sense of like their behaviors and their connection to certain animals. I like to use a book as well called Sometimes I Feel Like a Fox, because it connects to some of the indigenous pieces and that sort of respect of animals. And we talk a lot about animal behaviors and adaptations, and then we connect it to why students feel like those things, and then they really sort of open up who they are as people more through that. So when I'm working with younger guys, I really like to spend time talking about the idea of what animals are you like and why, and then we sort of explore the adaptations of those animals, and then we go outside. Like this is the beauty. Hey, hi, Roland. I was just talking about you. I was just talking about how great you are. This saying hello right now. This is Roland. I was talking about what a great science educator. Greetings from the NICU. Big up to Luke. Hi, buddy. Sorry. Totally off topic here. That's what I do though, and some people are worth getting off topic for. But when we're talking about animals, we're talking about the physical world. Students find it a lot easier to learn about things that they connect to, right? So when you talk about animal adaptations, when you talk about ecosystems and animal needs and the way that animals work and the way that they are like built to work certain ways, because that's natural to what they are, I've had a lot of students feel a lot more safe and content in who they are, because they understand that nature doesn't have any purposeless things. It doesn't. Everything in nature has a place and a purpose, and we're all just part of that. So by using poetry to have this emotional understanding, this emotional literacy in your students, they understand better that everything has a place, everything has purpose, and regardless of how they wake up and feel some days, the science of it is like you belong here. This ecosystem needs you for a variety of reasons. You need this ecosystem for a variety of reasons, and that's huge. Like so much of that is really, really big. Excuse me. I wanted to jump on a tech tip as well. It was important to me to sort of throw in little technology pieces every time. I have found through my work with National Geographic that citizen science is actually massive for this piece as well. Citizen science is when people who are not formally scientists collect data for different programs that are. One of my favorite citizen science apps is called iNaturalist, inaturalist.org. And what it is it's an observational database where people go out and they actually catalog what animals they see where, and they connect with nature that way. There's actually almost 62 million hits on there right now, 61.5 million, something like that. And they go out and they make these observations, and there's almost 330,000 different species that are observed, and everything counts and everything matters. So that way they're creating that connection between like there are other scientists out there doing the work as well, but then they also see the value of every little piece of the natural world. And I think that's the most important poetry that you can find in science, is that everything works because it does. Everything exists because it has to. And that includes people who don't always believe that there is a purpose to them being around. Like there's a purpose there every day. But the reality of it is, nature does not have purposeless things in it. So that connection, that emotional literacy connects to their own existence in the ecosystem, connects to the fact that they should love and respect the other things that are in that ecosystem, and that they should value all the pieces of that ecosystem. Which brings me to my last point. And I'm trying to rush a little bit here because I don't want to go crazy over time, even though I could talk about this forever. And if you want to hit me up, you know, on the old Twitter, we can absolutely keep talking about it. The last piece I wanted to talk about is I did a few presentations about conservancy, about people really caring about the environment and wanting to conserve the environment. And I talked a lot about the Galapagos, because the Galapagos is one of the best places I have ever been in my life. And it really changed my life to be there. But this presentation, the one that I'm talking about, was in Delaware. It was a virtual presentation done in Delaware, where 0% of the people I had talked to had been to the Galapagos Islands, right? Now, I talked to them, and I said the same thing that I'm saying to you right now. There is a lot of value in data. There is a lot of value in the things that you can pull out and present, and you can say, this place deserves to be protected because it has X amount of species, and X amount of these species are unique, and all these little pieces are wonderful and important, and absolutely the science of that is really, really valuable. But if you can take the science of why those things are important and connect it to the emotional piece of what makes it important to each of these people, then you've got a real shot at connecting to and saving some pretty big parts of the planet. I can't take all the people I spoke to at the Delaware conference, the Galapagos Islands, but if you use the 5 senses, if you write about the reasons why you are connected to certain spots, then all of a sudden you are asking people to care about the environment as a living, breathing thing, to care about the science of conservation as a living, breathing thing. So I did this presentation, and I talked about the taste of salt spray. And I talked about how when I was doing poetry workshops at the equator in the Galapagos, I had somebody who said, you know, I wrote about salt spray too, but I wrote about how I hated that taste on my lips because it felt like false food. You know, it felt like overly salty food, and it just reminded me that everything can be sold. I was like, that's brilliant. But then I talked to this conference of people, and I had never been to any of the places in Delaware. I still haven't been. It was a virtual conference. But a couple of the students wrote about why they care about the environment. And some of them wrote about trips they had taken to places, and that's great. But I had a girl write about her backyard, right? I had a girl write about the experience of going to her backyard and having her dad pick up a single piece of garbage and tell her why that was not okay in the backyard. Because if it's okay in our backyard, it's okay in every backyard. And just imagine the dirt of that. And instantly I was in that moment with her, and I wanted to go out and just pick up garbage because the science of it mattered. You can talk to people about pounds of garbage. You could talk to people about impact of pollution. Absolutely. The science of it is sound and really important. But if you take the science of that and connect it with the fact that science is inevitably and invariably a very personal thing, then you have a much more deepened understanding. One last quick little thing I wanted to throw at you. I did just the other day with some younger guys who are learning about the states of matter. Sometimes poetry and science can just be a really fun way to physically connect with information. We talked about what it felt like to be a solid, liquid, and gas. I had them write about the feeling of being a solid, liquid, and gas. And it was really simple. And when you change the language of what is the structure of a solid, liquid, gas, right? And you change the structure of what a solid, liquid, gas is and ask the question, what does it feel like to be in that structure? As soon as you change the language from tell me about what this is to tell me about how this feels, then not only are you building empathy, then you're allowing them to step into something that they're not. You really sort of place the understanding on them that, like, there's a feeling to being a solid. It's a stiffness. I had students, like, you could see after they had done their writing, they were reading it like, as a solid, I feel immovable, and their bodies were locking up. And I can tell you, those kids are not going to forget what it feels like to have the poetry of the science of solids, liquids, and gases written into their bones. So that's, I feel like I have talked too much today. I just wanted to, I just wanted to toss as much as I could out there because, man, poetry and science are absolutely synonymous. So I'm sorry, Tara, I probably talked too much today, but I'm still very keen on talking to anybody else who wants to about this. If you want to hit me up on the social media, I would love it. Yeah. Kristen, absolutely. The senses are what it's all about. Sensorial connection. Yeah. If you can get them connected through the senses, because that's something we share. You know, like, not everyone can go to the Galapagos, but if I tell the spray in my face from being on the Zodiac tasted like salt, you've probably tasted salt before. Yeah. Sarah, I think you're muted. It looks like you're talking.
Yeah, I
I was like, I can keep going. I could talk about science and poetry like forever.
I was just gonna say you did fantastic. It looks like everybody was super engaged, and I agree with you on being able to connect to the things that we can connect to, which is the senses. I mean, everyone can connect to that, and I love just the idea of changing the question to "How does this feel?"
Yeah.
That's also something everyone can connect to, right? Like maybe I don't really fully understand how to draw a solid, but I can describe a solid by feeling. And yeah, I love so much about that, and my emotions, body language, and so getting all those pieces involved and just poetry and science being synonymous, I'm in. I believe it.
We did a poetry rap battle once where we talked about how does it feel to be all of the simple machines, and not like I have kids coming back years later who are like, remember when we did that rap battle when I was like talked about what's an inclined plane and how do you use a wedge? Like remember how I was a wedge and I had like the wedge rap? Like, yeah, of course I do. Of course I remember that. So if you can connect it to the feeling of those things, you're still doing the science work. You're just admitting that you feel about it.
Exactly. And I have such a vivid imagination. So I feel like imagery, being able to connect to imagery would be very helpful for me in any subject area. Of course, I think like in metaphors. So I think there's probably a lot of kids out there too, just being able to help them to understand that poetry literally is everywhere. And I love this. I love this session. I love your over in the comments. You guys did such a great job. And there's several of you that have some great ideas too. So please continue to share those out. And if you're listening on the playbacks, please do continue to share those in the comments too. But then head over to Twitter, because Mike, will you share your handle, your Twitter handle again? Because I know you're not necessarily on Facebook, but I know you're over on.
No, I am not a Facebook person, but my Twitter handle is at urpoetry.edu. So you can please connect with me on there, because I can't tell you how exceptional it has been to already connect with people. Like the book has been such an opportunity to see what people are doing in the most wonderful ways and places, and I love it. I love it.
I love it too. Roland, is that a hashtag already? Sensible science? Or
I love it.
If it's not, it should be. I love it too. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining. And I really do appreciate you joining us on a special live night on Tuesday. We'll be back next Tuesday with Mike, and he'll be talking about, Mike, what are we talking about next week?
I believe next week poetry is social studies. I'm pretty sure.
Poetry is
if poetry is social studies next week, then I might be bringing a little bit of rap battle to you a little bit.
Hey, I'm ready for it. I'm ready.
It won't be good. It won't be good. I'm not.
Amazing. I'm super excited. Roland, you should start it. You should start that hashtag.
I agree. Whatever Roland says goes for me. He's one of the best teachers I've ever met. One of the best human beings I've ever met. I'm lucky to know that guy.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
All day.
Well, friends, we will see you back next week. And remember, this will be shared out on social media. So if you know some science teachers that missed it, be sure and share the YouTube link with them. This is streamed on YouTube too. So we'll be sharing it out starting tomorrow with the YouTube link. Be sure and share that out with the science teachers that missed it, because we'd love for them to get on board with all these awesome poetry ideas for bringing them into the classroom. They're excited about your rap battle. I hope I'm not having to battle you.
You know what?
Solo battle. You're going.
I'm gonna have to toss it out there then. Yeah. Spoiler alert. There will be a little bit of a rap battle going on.
I love it. All right, friends. Well, have a great week, and thank you so much for joining us, Mike. Thanks again for sharing your wisdom with us. And don't forget, if you haven't checked out Your Poetry, click the link above or below this video wherever you're watching, and grab your copy today. You will not be disappointed, I promise. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining again.
Thanks, everyone.